Hello, BookTube. All right, we're continuing this impromptu library tour. We're just going to go on to the bitter end. And we've been doing biography, the biography bookshelves. Biography is my favorite genre, so it's been a great deal of fun to share these with you. And we're now down to the bottom shelf of this last bookcase. And the first one is new. It's a masterpiece. I strongly recommend it. And it's Alan Walker's Life of Frédéric Chopin. It's a very big thing, and it's a very reserved cover, just an embossed profile. I have a feeling, the impression I get is that the trade paperback, which is due this year, will not look like this. Will in fact look clunky and worse, sort of conventional. I'm hoping that's not true, but I'm glad to have this one. I wouldn't have gotten rid of it anyway. I think Alan Walker is fantastic, and I love this book. Here, let's leave that out so that we can maneuver the others. Oh, okay. All right, the next four books are classic Brattle Bookshop books. The Brattle Bookshop is a used bookstore in Boston, and they have such a high turnover of books that you can really get anything there. If you're patient and if you go often, you can get anything at the Brattle. And I have, over time. I have let, oddly enough, I have let going there sort of lapse, and that needs to change. It's obviously not going to change today since it's pouring rain. And I think it's going to be pouring rain tomorrow too, but I think the weekend is predicted to be fine weather. And little Frida, who you can see in the background there, is perfectly okay being left alone for a couple of hours. She's perfectly okay doing that. So maybe this weekend I will talk myself into going back to the Brattle. But these are the sorts of things that won't turn up at a usual used bookstore, especially since usual used bookstores are much thinner on the ground than they've ever been. This is the 2-volume autobiography and memoirs of the Duke of Argyll. Let me see if I can get you a picture of his grace. Yes, there we go. He's a Victorian era noble and politician, one of the dying breed of one of the last flickers, the last embers of a centuries-old tradition in which public life in England didn't pay, and so you had to have an independent means to go into it, and so it sort of fell to the nobility of the country to run the country, and everybody wrote their books. It was a hyper-literate age, so everybody wrote their books, and the Duke of Argyll's books they're extremely interesting for me. They'll never be, as far as I know, there'll never be a biography of him. So this is the closest you'll ever come, and it's priceless. You read a lot of Victorian history, biographies of Gladstone or Disraeli, or political analyses of the time, and they're built on state documents and you know, that sort of thing, minutes and laws and whatnot, but also on these memoirs. They're also built on these memoirs, and if they're not, then they are straying from the people who are actually there. And same thing with this next one. This next one I've shown you before. This is 25 Years by Gray of Falodon, who was another Victorian-era poobah, and who also was such a poobah that, like the Duke of Argyll, he didn't actually have to have a name. So there he is. There's Viscount Gray. He could just be called Gray of Falodon. and his 2-volume memoir is gripping reading. It's stiff in the way of Victorian gentlemen, but it's gripping reading once you get used to it. Okay, all right, this next one is Larry Sabato. This is the Kennedy half-century. This is a study of the Kennedy presidency, a study of the assassination, and also, most refreshing, a study of the long shadow that it cast on American politics, which you wouldn't think would be there. You wouldn't think that it did cast a long shadow, because the assassination was followed immediately by a whole raft of things that Kennedy did not want to happen, in addition to a whole raft of things that he did want to happen. So you sort of have to pick and choose, but I think this author does a really good job of that. I'm a little bit nonplussed that this book is here instead of with all the other Kennedy books, but all the other Kennedy books are in the little book room and not out here at all. So I might have to set that aside and correct that. Okay. All right, this is Ellsworth Faun. I want to show you a picture of Ellsworth Faun. That is Ellsworth Faun. This is Potomac Squire, her book on George Washington. Isn't that lovely? I really need to reinforce this, or it's going to fall apart. This is a study of George Washington in large part before he became president, and also a study of the Virginia, the Potomac, the Mount Vernon parts of his life that ran coincidental with his whole life. It's sort of it's a look at him, at that aspect of Washington's life, and I liked it. I liked it quite a bit, mainly for the precise period prose. This came out in when 1963. So it was written in the 50s, and it really shows. That was a golden age for English prose. Okay, then we have what certainly her crowd of enemies would have hoped is the very last of the great Victorian noblemen who ruled the country with an iron fist and very little pity in their hearts, and that is, of course, Margaret Thatcher. This is the Downing Street years, the gigantic volume about her time in power. This, no blurbs or anything, no blurbs are necessary, they just have this on the back. And this is one of the more remarkable, I mean, the titans of the mid-20th century, of the Reagan era. Gorbachev, Kohl, Pope John Paul II, Reagan, Thatcher, they all had massive books written about them, and quite a few of them wrote massive books, and they were all ghostwritten. And this, I think, is the most elegant, the most readable, the most witty of those ghostwritten gigantic memoirs. Not to be completely trusted, to put it mildly, not to be completely trusted, but very entertaining to read. Books like this are usually where interest goes to die when it comes to gigantic 1,000-page books, but this one actually carries itself from beginning to end, which I wish I could say about Bill Clinton's book, My Life. You'll notice that it's among the many, many, many dozens of books that I obviously should have in this biography section that I don't currently have. I wish I could say the same thing about his book, and once his narrative gets him into national politics, you very much can say that. I defy anyone to read the second half of My Life and not love it, and not just be gripped from beginning to end. It reads like The West Wing, only it was real. It was affecting the whole world. The long and torturous part at the beginning, the snake oil salesman and the backroom deals in Arkansas, that's insider baseball. You have to be interested in William Clinton, in Bill Clinton, to be interested in that part, especially since he's, of course, not going to go into any truth about any of those days. He's not going to go into any kind of insider trading or rape or anything like that. You're going to have to go elsewhere for the truth about those years. But once he hits the national spotlight, even though the level of lying stays relatively the same, stratospheric level, it gets itself more interesting, and a lot more truth comes in. Just slops in around the margins. I wish I still had that book. I'd put it alongside this one. I will have to get a copy of that book. Okay, all right. Next one is a classic. This is W. Jackson Bates' biography of Samuel Johnson. We've seen other Johnson biographies here, but a full-length Johnson biography that covers the whole man and the writings and the personalities and the tics and the shadow that he cast on history, that kind of book is very, very hard to write. Johnson is a whole universe. And this book does it. So there are plenty of other Johnson biographies out there, and I don't think I would ever bother with getting any of them unless a gigantic masterwork comes along that I don't anticipate. I don't anticipate anyone ever beating Bates' book on him. Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Oh, here we go. A couple of door stoppers. This is William Manchester, and this is his life work on Churchill. This one is The Last Lion, which he wrote in collaboration with Paul Reed, and I'm using collaboration very, very generously here. Paul Reed wrote this book, but he tried to do it in the spirit and sometimes disastrously in the vocabulary of William Manchester, and it's a terrific account. I absolutely loved it, and the same thing with this one. This is William Manchester. This is Visions of Glory, which is Churchill as a very young man, before he really came to any kind of gigantic prominence, and then disastrously when he was a gigantic prominence during World War II. I don't know why I don't have... I don't know why I don't have the other book, now that I think about it. I've got a book on the Churchill's beginnings, and I've got a book on Churchill's endings. But I don't have I don't have the middle volume. Why is that, I wonder? Okay, well, I don't know why that is. I don't know why I don't have all the Manchester volumes of Churchill. They are pungent, but very entertaining reading. I don't know why I don't have them all. I have two. I'll have to fix that. All I have to do to fix these things is start looking for used books again. What else is here? Oh, okay, good. This is Royston Lambert's Beloved in God. A very biased but very source literate look at the Emperor Hadrian and Antinous, the gorgeous boy that he fell in love with and commemorated all throughout the empire with towns and lovely statues. There's not much that we can know, not for sure, and this book is about as thorough as you could ever do on the subject in terms of nonfiction. You have to make your decision ahead of time when it comes to Hadrian and Antinous as to what was going on. You cannot determine what was going on from the sources. You have to make your decision ahead of time as to what story you're going to tell. A love story for the ages, misunderstanding, massively unfair and serialized years-long act of predation. You have to decide that ahead of time and then write your book accordingly. And I've noticed that most people that do write those books don't, even in the course of their books, consider any other interpretations. They just stick with their own. Okay, and the last one we have here is a trade paperback of Amanda Foreman's Georgiana. Her book about a legendary Duchess of Devonshire. That would have, I don't know why I don't have this in a hardcover, that her book would have appeared and been praised, I think, and because it's delightful. It's an absolutely delightful book. I think it would have appeared and been praised and then vanished, except that it coincided with the death of Princess Diana. I believe that's the timing involved that made it an unbelievable bestseller. Just millions and millions of copies sold. I think that there might have been something going on there, some correspondence between those two events. I don't bemoan it because it put a really good book in the hands of thousands and thousands of people who would otherwise not have considered it. And that's it. That is the end of our biography tour. It feels like we should be going on with biographies because it's not just My Life by Bill Clinton that isn't here, right? It's Blanche Cook Wheason's volumes on Eleanor Roosevelt. It's well, you name it. I don't have a life of John Milton, for instance. I don't have. There's no life of the Emperor Constantine, not even one. And on and on and on and on from there. I mean, there's all sorts of classics. I don't have David McCullough's Truman, which you see at every yard sale in the world. I don't have these things, and I don't quite know why. So the biography section should be much bigger than what we're seeing now. But we're done in any case. That's all the biographies that I have grouped together. The only other biographies that I have are in the little book room, separate from these. Just a handful, a scattered handful, and all the Kennedy books. But that ends the biography section of this library tour. So we will now launch into the unknown. We are just going to make our way around the room. And that means that those of you who have maybe rolled your eyes, I'm very comforted by the fact that there don't seem to be many of you who have. But I have a lot of lurkers, so you might be rolling your eyes in complete silence. Those of you who rolled your eyes, maybe you're not interested in biography. And if that's true, then these library tours have had nothing of interest to you because it's just been one biography after another. And that stops. Our next library tour will be those bookcases right over there. It'll be totally miscellaneous, and they're triple stacked. So it'll be a while, and it'll be totally miscellaneous, and it won't all be one kind of book, and we'll just see what we find. So we'll reconvene then. Thank you, Book 2.